Retro Tech Toys is proudly sponsored by PCBWay. Get your PCBs delivered quickly for as low as $5 plus shipping. They even have CNC and 3D printing services, so you can get your entire retro project done in one go. Be sure to check out PCBWay in the link in the description below. Welcome back. So we know that when we're talking about modern PCs, every single one of us want to get the best thing that we can possibly afford, or the best thing that'll work for what we want to use it for. If we're not gaming, we probably want something that will hold up for general web surfing and email and whatever else we need it for a set amount of years before we have to spend money on a new machine. If we game, then of course we're going to want the best CPU, the best GPU, and as much RAM as you can pile into your machine, and you'll probably want to upgrade that thing every couple of years until you've got to just end up replacing it. But I'm not talking about new PCs. What I want to talk about is our retro machine. What's the best way to handle a retro computer collection? Now, this is one of those things that I see people talk about all the time in Facebook groups and various other places where I go to talk about retro computing. There's always been this debate of having a period machine versus having it upgraded as far as it'll go, which is still a period machine because you're simply putting upgrades in it that the computer was designed to accept. And there's also something else that we can talk about in the way of third-party add-ons, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. But for now, let's talk about retro PC. What do you like to do? Do you max out the RAM? Because there's something to be said about, for instance, having a Tandy 1000EX, which comes with 256K of built-in RAM. So you've got 256 kilobytes of RAM, and you can put DOS 3.3 on that, and you can usually get DOS 5.0 on there, but then when you're running programs, you start running into issues with not having enough RAM to play the games that you want to play. For instance, if you want to run versions of Ultima on MS-DOS on a Tandy 1000, you really need RAM upgrades. They have original upgrades that you can buy that were out then that'll take the thing up to, 640K, and that's more than enough to play many of the DOS games that a Tandy, for example, was designed to play. Unfortunately, if you go on eBay, when those are available, they can be up to $175 to $200. The good news is we have people today who make upgrade cards, and they do much more than upgrade the RAM. They'll give you 640K and sometimes even a little bit more RAM, and they'll give you the ability to use flash storage and several other things. So they're really good expansion cards, and they often cost a fraction of what you would pay. Now, with other machines, like for example, I have an IBM PS2 Model 30 that I'm working on right now for a future video, and if you've checked my Twitter recently, you saw that that one's taken a little bit of time because I'm being really careful and taking it slow on that one. But for that one, you would think that you could just put regular 30-pin RAM in it and you'd be good to go. Unfortunately, that's not the case. IBM designed that in a way to where it takes proprietary RAM. It is 30-pin RAM, but the pinout is completely different on their board, so you can't just use a typical RAM chip. You know, if you take a 9-chip 30-pin RAM sim, you can rewire it and do some soldering to make it work. But then you look into the issue of modifying something that's original and that's not being produced anymore and possibly breaking it. And that's somewhere where I think it's sort of a gray area. I don't like to do that. Unfortunately, to get a hold of the RAM for these IBM machines, you're going to spend a lot of money if you even find one available on eBay. So then the issue arises, do you keep it as a period piece or do you upgrade it? Do you spend that money? Is it worth it? Or will it do everything that you want it to do as a stock machine? And also you have to think about the displays. Now, there are many devices being built that are like RGB to HDMI, and things that allow you to take like a Tandy 1000 or something old and plug it into an HDMI monitor, use an LCD display. And some of these displays will even work if you use the composite jacks and an adapter. So what do you want to do in that situation? Do we want to keep using a CRT? Do we try to use the original monitor that came with it? Or do we buy the adapter that allows us to hook it up to a modern display? That one, I can go either way on that. I don't mind using a modern display. I like having the original display or something that's similar if I can get it, Unfortunately, it's really hard to get a hold of, for example, a Tandy display that would work on a 1000EX. So you end up using just a CRT television, which I've done multiple times, and I've also hooked it up to a couple of modern displays, which is fine. Now, as we all know, the RF output on a Tandy 1000 is not good. It looks terrible. So you really want to use a CGA monitor or some kind of an adapter that would give you HDMI. Many people prefer to just use a CRT display. I talk to tons of people that that's the only way they're going to do it. And I've talked to other people who just refuse to collect CRTs because they take up so much space, and they do. I have 3 or 4 of them right now, and it's too much. My office is very small. I've got like an 8-foot by 9.5-foot or so office, and it's really tiny. So basically what you see in these videos, I don't have that much more than what you're seeing right now for storage, so I have to be really creative. So, you know, it's hard to collect that sort of thing. You end up just wanting to use one modern display for everything, but I can kind of see how it would go in every direction, how somebody would want to use the CRT or how somebody would prefer not to. We also have to think about when you're upgrading PCs or when you're using retro machines, are we trying to rebuild our childhood machines? Or are we trying to take something that we always wanted as a kid, but we had to settle for something else, but now we don't want to settle for something else, so we're taking that thing that we always wanted as a child and we're building that to the max. So that would be a situation to where you still want a retro machine, but you'd want to upgrade it as far as it would go. So you just have this, what would have been a monster back then, but you couldn't afford it or you just didn't get it for whatever reason. And that's something that I completely respect as well. For me, I tend to want to take a computer and upgrade it as far as it will go within the period that it was manufactured. So for example, my IBM PS2, it can take up to 4 megabytes of RAM. I'd like 4 megabytes of RAM if I could ever find the upgrades. So I wouldn't want to do anything that would modify it beyond that. That said, I'm perfectly happy with using flash storage, as the original hard drives are just failing by the thousands these days. It's so hard to get a period hard drive on one of those machines that still works right. They are so old now. So I think in that case where you have trouble finding period pieces, it's okay to use modern pieces. But then we get to microcomputers, you know, the 8-bit micros, and some of the ones that came beyond that. Like, I'm not just talking about the Commodore 64, I'm talking once we jumped out of 8-bit and we started looking at Amigas and Atari ST. How many of you have serious upgrades in those things, modern upgrades like the Vampire card, things that just up the CPU speed, and things that give you tons more RAM and tons more storage, and things that give you wireless capabilities, just things that were made recently that were never intended for those older machines. Is that something that you would enjoy having on a retro machine? For me, with the micros, I just think they're fun, so I'm okay with taking those things and just adding all sorts of crazy add-ons to those. I have no problem with the Vampires and with extra flash storage and with increasing the memory and all that stuff, putting Wi-Fi capabilities on them. You know, seeing people send emails nowadays, modern email, through like an Amiga 500, I think that's really cool. I'm okay with that. Now, the reason being probably is because when I came into computing, I got serious about computing with, a full-fledged PC desktops. So I tend to keep those, more period correct. But I got into 8-bit micros later on, so that might be why I don't mind all the crazy add-ons that exist for them now, and I think they're actually kind of cool. I guess the question here is, do we want an authentic experience, or do we want a modern retro experience? And my specific question for all of you is, how does your retro collection look? Do you have more period machines? Do you have maxed out machines? Or do you have machines that are full of third-party add-ons? Or do you have a combination of all of them? So I'd really like to know that. Let's talk about it in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching Retro Tech Toys. This was a really interesting video to make, and I'm curious about your thoughts. So thanks for watching. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.